Welcome to a special edition of Ed's Not Dead. We call it Teacher Tips.
Teacher Tips.
Teacher Tips.
This is the part of the show or special segment. What do we call it, Mr. Krabs?
I don't know, yeah.
Teacher Tips.
It's just the special Teacher Tips.
Teacher Tips, and we get good feedback on it. It's where the three of us talk about all things pedagogy.
Nothing but pedagogy here,
Nothing
baby.
but pedagogy. No policy.
Boring.
No governance.
The worst.
Terrible.
We talk about the art and science of teaching.
There you go.
Right.
So this week on Teacher Tips, it is the all-important topic of the organization of the classroom and the impact that it has on climate and student learning.
Yes.
It's a big one. Let me ask you a question right out of the gate, Mr. Sids.
All right.
Because you have probably been in more classrooms than me and Mr. Crable combined.
That's right, Joe.
That's right, true. Anyway, so you are the resident expert and you are the teacher expert. So I just want you don't know much else, but you know a lot about that. Okay?
I've done 400 informal observations in 3 years.
That's impressive. That's impressive. How many?
Almost 400.
Wow. Okay. All right. I can still do it better.
That's pretty wild.
I can still do it better right up than
With
you.
my FileMaker, I've been using FileMaker to make my formal observations.
All right, so let me ask you this,
Okay, tell me.
and then we'll get into the topic. Crable's already sweating over
No,
it because
no,
I haven't framed
Frame the learning.
the segment. Okay, fine. I'll frame.
No, ask him. Ask
Okay.
him your question.
Have you ever been in a teacher's classroom that was incredibly messy, with an incredibly messy desk?
Yep.
And messy workspaces, stuff all around the room. That was an effective teacher.
That was an effective teacher.
Yeah.
It does no.
Is it as simple as what I'm setting it out to be?
I think there's always a little bit of clutter in teachers' classrooms that's just going to be there.
Right.
But when I had a teacher a few years ago who I was coaching and working with, and it was actually distracting for me as the observer, and it was definitely distracting for the kids. And I stayed after with her once, and we had gotten to a point in our relationship where I said, "Your classroom is a mess, and we need to fix it." She's like, "Good, I need help."
That's good. Yeah.
And we stayed for another hour.
Right.
And I told we're going through stuff. I said, recycle it, throw it away, get rid of it, move it. And it helped clear her own mind and get herself organized mentally as well.
Right. All right. Good. Thank you.
That was a provocative question. I think it goes to show you if you're not an organized
I don't think it's
teacher,
black and white. Do you?
No, it's not. But if things are all over the place and it's cluttered, it's just there's a vibe in the classroom. If you can't find stuff quickly, you're not going to have a well-paced lesson.
Yeah.
You're going to interrupt yourself just trying to find things. If kids can't find things, they get frustrated or get disengaged.
Yep.
So all that.
Okay.
Well, and I mean, also the message that it sends if you have piles of junk and stuff just strewn about the room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think that sends a positive message to kids that the space is valued or
That's a good point.
is it's junk. It's garbage.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. All right. So we're going to dive into a piece in Edutopia, Decluttering Your Classroom,
Yeah.
by Heather Walpert Garon. Do you think I'm saying that correctly?
Yeah. Twitter, tween teacher.
Yep. Thoughtful reflection will help you make decisions about what to keep and what to discard in your classroom.
One of the reasons why this article resonated with me is a lot of schools are going into their spring break time period, and it's a great time to do some spring cleaning in your classroom and to not leave your classroom worse than you came into it. So I thought it was a good time period for both teachers to reflect on to what extent they are organized and to actually organize their classroom before
Throw
they
some
head
stuff out, man.
before you go on break.
Yeah.
Throw it out.
No, that's a great idea.
All right. So our author says that research tells us that the classroom environment is vital, and recent reports showed that our rooms can have too much of a good thing.
Yep.
Now, I will say that this has always been a theme in elementary classrooms.
Yeah.
That there's always elementary classrooms where you find sensory overload.
Yes.
And because there's so much and kids spend so much time in one room, decluttering is critical. But for example, she says posters might make a room feel inviting or engaging, but having too many can distract students. Or flexible seating, for all its benefits, all of those kinds of accoutrements, pillows,
Yep.
and stools, they can be clutter.
And in terms of the wall displays, I was in another school for an event recently, and I was just there for professional development, and I was in some random classrooms, and the one classroom reminded me of what mine was, when I first started teaching, where I just put so much stuff all over the wall because I thought, if they were distracted, they could look somewhere and learn something. That was my thinking at the time. Right. And by the time I had gotten around to it, I stopped doing a lot of that preparation just because it was taking so much time to prepare and plan. And anyway, so I was in this classroom, and probably one of the most important things that should be on the wall is the poster title was, "What does my grade mean?" And it was on like an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper in the far corner of the room, laminated so it was like shiny and you couldn't even read it. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem to like make sense. But if you look at the consequences chart that the person had in their room,
enormous.
I took a picture. It's enormous. And they had beginning of class procedures, consequences, and dismissal procedures that were fairly big, but still not even big enough for kids to look at. And then finally, there was a poster on the 8 mathematical practices on an 8.5 inch by 11.
I'm sure the kids were glued to that.
Totally glued
Couldn't
to
take
it.
their eyes
So,
off it.
but it wasn't a purposeful display.
What do you think about this as a rule of thumb? As you Marie Kondo your room, what purpose does it serve? If you ask yourself with everything, what purpose does this serve?
Yeah.
And if it's not something that furthers or benefits students in some way, get rid of it.
All right.
Is that
all right? So let me step back even further. Let me ask. Let's start with our resident teacher organization routines specialist over there, Mr. C.H. Siddons. Where does a teacher start with setting up a classroom and putting systems in place to keep it organized? What are the critical components of that process?
First thing I would say is like a rules or a norms poster.
Okay.
That everybody can see from anywhere in the room.
Okay.
Clear,
How
not
many?
sloppy. How many rules?
Yeah, norms.
No more than 5 norms.
Should they say no or don't in them?
Should be no negative words in there.
Okay.
What do you expect kids to do? And they have to be measurable. Mm-hmm. So
Be respectful. Is that
be
one?
respectful is not a recommended norm.
Okay, you're missing the point.
I was answering questions.
No, that's a norms poster is great, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay. You said where do you start?
What are the primary components? You have a classroom.
Yep.
How does a teacher approach organizing that classroom so that it supports student learning?
I would say you're going beyond the wall displays.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out what is your
the specificity of that
this is the
bigger.
space.
where are your desks, first of all?
Okay.
How are your desks arranged?
Okay, good.
For a lot of teachers that float, they don't really have a choice in that, so you have to figure out how you are gonna move around the room, and then how are kids gonna move around the room, especially if you plan on incorporating movement in a regular fashion.
Can I just say with
Student
this
seating is critical.
and with the spaces too, Fred Jones has a great rule of thumb where there's sort of like green zones and red zones.
Yeah.
And the green zones are zones that you can get to or walk to with maybe 5 steps or a minimal amount of space that you can get to really easily.
Okay.
Red zones are essentially super far away, walled off, that you can't get to, that are islands of kids that you can never be next to them. And so even if you do a more traditional like row type seating, maybe it's 2 by 3 chunks with alleyways in between so that you have free movement and access to all parts of the room.
Okay.
And that you can stand anywhere you want. There's no red zones, there's no off-limit zones in the room.
All right.
Which is why he promotes proximity control,
Right.
which is all about shifting your zones of proximity and making sure that you're shifting that green zone and yellow zone as much as possible where kids won't goof off.
All right. So number 1 was seating.
Yeah.
Number
Seating.
2.
So seating is also, the other thing about seating is you want to make sure that you can move around easily.
Okay.
And when I used to have tables with seats, I would actually move the seats to actually mimic, a kid sitting in it. So then I would walk around the room when there are seats pushed out of the desks.
Okay.
So you knew exactly how much space kids needed to get in and out of the seat.
All right. I'm going to give you number 2. And
All right, number 2.
And then you're going to talk about it.
All right, do it.
Materials of instruction.
So if it's Chromebooks, you have a spot in the Chromebook cart where it can easily be accessed by kids and not going to knock into anybody, and make sure that there's a traffic flow for moving in and out. If you don't explicitly tell kids that, that's fine, but make sure that it's something that kids can assume they can quickly get in and out.
Okay.
And then paper, like picking up paper, there should be a general area where they're picking up paper as they're coming in.
Got it.
Or like
Turn-in
tray.
papers.
There should be a turn-in bin.
Turn-in bins, come on.
Turn-in bin, super easy, super cheap.
See, you guys, I'm old school here. We're not talking about routines. We're talking about materials of instruction.
Yeah.
So where do you put what are the rest of your materials?
What do you mean?
You're on. This guy keeps interjecting.
What do you mean, materials for instruction?
Materials. You started talking about
Chromebooks.
You started talking about Chromebooks. That's what I'm talking
Okay.
about. So give me the Casey Siddons cart with all the art materials on it. Talk about. Yeah. Come on. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, like the materials that they would use to...
Correct. They need things in the classroom to use.
Oh.
How do you talked about Chromebooks. Keep going.
For me, there's always a separate section, either a cart or a shelf where I just have baskets of materials. And those baskets you can buy pretty cheap, or just find them. People give them away. They're plastic baskets that you can throw. Just have ones for pencils. You can have ones for art supplies. You can have ones for... they sell pencil boxes for $1 a pop at the dollar store. You can use that for table groups.
Right.
A lot of the stuff you kind of collect over time, and people sometimes just get rid of them, and you just have to figure out a way to make it work for you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and the key to that, who has the most control of that, teacher or student?
The teacher.
Okay. Teacher does?
Yeah.
So you don't, I always thought when I was in your classroom, one of the things I liked was the way you had materials of instruction out. It really, you were really relying on the kids to be independent.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
In how they access them. You weren't like having to give a pencil every
No.
time.
I need a pencil. Hold on, let me go to
Yeah,
my
yeah,
bottom
yeah.
left
So you had
drawer.
to-
and
There
get
was never...
something.
So you were entrusting kids.
Correct. Okay. Well, and that came down to labeling. I labeled everything and made sure
you did.
every box was labeled, and showed them how to do it. And then the other piece, they knew where to get pencils because I didn't care about giving out pencils, but I also kept a box of pencils in my back pocket.
Okay.
You know how you learn responsibility?
You teach it.
You
to
have
them.
responsibility.
You have responsibility.
That's right.
I also didn't want to be bothered when I'm in the middle of teaching or doing something with kids, and then someone asked me, to get a pencil or something. That's not worth my time.
All right, number three.
Number three.
Explanatory devices. So we started talking about posters. What should be around the room? Norms, rules.
Norms, general expectations if you have extra ones, but I try to keep it simple in terms of, like, if I have norms, all my classroom expectations would fall into those 5 norms or 6 norms.
Depending on what you teach.
Yeah.
Crable used to have visual instructional plans.
Visual instructional plans.
Look at Crable.
That's right. So things that
He inspired me to make those.
things that you have kids do over and over and over again.
Right.
That, yes, a kid could ask you and you could say, well, it's April. You should know how to do that already. You know what I mean? Which doesn't actually solve anything.
No.
So for me, when I was teaching computer-based classes and how to save files or turn files in, there was short, click file, and then maybe a little screenshot. So there was a mixture of words and pictures for how kids would do it. And they said, how do I turn this in? And you just go, bam, right there. Do those.
And they were clear as day.
How about multiple places to teach?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Right.
my last couple of years I had a small group instruction table.
There you go.
Yep.
The, ding,
The
ding,
kidney
ding.
table.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah,
And-
multiple learning centers.
Right, and back in the old days, I would typically have at least a minimum of 2 easels on different areas of the room.
Yeah.
Where I could teach from. This was back before the days of Promethean boards and
Sure.
smart boards.
Yeah.
And they're still pretty common in elementary schools.
Yeah.
And you'd have obviously student seating, but in the elementary classroom, you often have kids on the floor. So
Yeah.
you instruct from the floor.
And secondary teachers can do it as well. Even if you don't have a special table, you can have a bunch of other desks that are in a specific area that are not meant for regular seating, but are meant for small group instruction.
All right, number 4.
Number 4.
And this is one that's typically overdone or not thought of enough.
Oh boy.
Aesthetics.
Man, I was gonna say.
man.
I thought you weren't gonna say that.
Come on,
Man.
This is my wheelhouse, baby.
That's how you were. I thought it was. I was just like waiting. I was like, all right, Robbie's gonna want to wrap the segment up, and I'm gonna have to be like, that's the vibe of the classroom. Come on.
No, because Siddons had his Green Bay Packer stuff in his classroom.
That's true.
And so, a part of aesthetics is what's pleasing to the eye for the teacher and what you think will engage kids. So let's talk a little bit about aesthetics. How do you get it just right?
I think you have to, by the last year, I had like a specific area of the room, just a small spot for like the Green Bay Packers stuff or things that kids used to give me or artwork, and I just kept it there. That was a specific area that kids could see it. They can glean a little information about me as a person, and that I like Calvin and Hobbes and music, and that I'm a human. I'm a person. So if you could make one connection through some kid who likes the same band or kid who likes the same cartoon or whatever, that you value what kids give you over the years, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah.
And there's always the parent that comes in and loves the fact that I love the Grateful Dead, and they're like, nice poster, man.
Yep.
So let me
throw another one out there.
No, this will be an extension of that. At the beginning of the year, I came up with the idea of hiring somebody to come in and decorate your classroom for you.
That's an embarrassment. Can we edit this out of the show?
Did you do that?
No, I never did it. But for people that are aesthetically challenged, such as myself, that like nice spaces but don't know how to go about making them look nice.
Great question.
It's
Great
hard.
question.
And it was somewhat tongue in cheek about hiring somebody. It was it was like, man. And when I was teaching, it's like if I could pay somebody $100 to come in and be like, just make it a really nice place that feels good to come into. I don't know how to do that.
Like my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
I had my wife came in with her friend, and they helped me make all my bulletin boards.
Yeah, mine did too for years.
Yeah,
because I think there is an sort of known or unwritten. It's not a put a green wall up here. It's like just make it look nice and feel good.
Right.
There's definitely a happy medium between over decorating and over cluttering and like just the bare bones cinder block walls. One thing I got from a real simple thing you could do, and I got from a colleague that we used to work with, that she used to cover her back wall with that bulletin board paper from floor to ceiling.
Butcher block,
all the different colors, and it was a different color of the rainbow. So the whole wall was just beautiful. It took a lot of work.
That's an elementary go-to right there.
But you cover it, and then she used it as an incentive for kids who, when they took their end-of-unit assessments or any kind of quiz, if they earned an A or a certain grade, they could sign their name on the wall.
Nice.
Right.
And I think kids just like writing on the wall.
Yeah.
And
it feels naughty.
Yeah. But it's cool, and you get your name on there, and the kids loved it. It was always fun.
So let's talk systems. One of the best teachers, actually.
By the way, we're moving away from the decluttering.
Here we are.
You're talking about foundational stuff, really, right?
Because my approach was an ounce of prevention.
True. Good point.
Well, you won't have to declutter.
Good point.
But when I was a new fourth grade teacher, one of my teammates, Jane Zarnopis, she came in my classroom after school one day, and between the piles of photocopies that I had, that I was going to use, because this was the height of the worksheet era in the 90s, and then papers that I had collected that God knows when I was going to grade them. She came in and she said to me, "You need systems. There
are no systems."
And so her whole thing was, her systems meant routines. So what are those routines to keep the clutter from accumulating?
I think I want to pass this one over to Crable, because he was the kind of teacher that I envied in terms of keeping the paper clutter to a very minimum and being able to systematize whatever you did. You systematized that process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you kind of alluded to some of it before in terms of when kids come in the classroom, what do they do?
Yep.
And it's day in, day out, every day. But guess what? Kids are still going to come in the last month of school and go, "Where's the warm-up sheet?"
Yeah,
Wait,
exactly.
What do I do? You know what I mean? And you just got to get over that.
Right.
Where do I put this?
Where do I put... Right, So that, you mentioned the materials, about always knowing when and how to get the materials, the appropriate times to sort of ask, stuff like the bathroom. I always thought it was really important too, when I was framing my lesson, to let kids know I'm going to be talking for 5 minutes. I need 5 minutes of your time where you're not talking, where you're not asking questions, where you're not doing this. I'm going to do something for 5 minutes, and then it's going to be your turn.
Right.
But now it's my turn.
Right.
And you're going to get to talk, and you're going to get to move, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do all this fun stuff. But now it's my turn.
It is my turn. It's my turn.
I probably said my turn about 25 times. So really setting the expectations, but knowing that it was not infinite, or it was not, forever, that it was a finite amount of time. I had a table where I had kids' folders, where they turned everything in, where there was scrap paper, where there was pencil bins that I picked up off the floor in the hallway or the classroom or whatever. And then having kids, clean up after themselves. And this is another Fred Jones thing is, rotating, and you did this as well, rotating groups or jobs.
Oh, jobs are good.
Kids,
jobs are a must.
Yeah.
I had
there's one of you and there's 30 of them.
Right.
Yep.
They can get more done than you.
His quote is don't do anything that a kid can do for
Exactly.
themselves.
And
well, that's parenting in a nutshell.
And knowing me, you better believe that I took that to heart. And that if the kids could do it, they were darn well going to do it. And going back to responsibility too, give everybody a little bit of ownership. It's not my classroom and I. It's we.
And in terms of how you had
that's Finn.
That's Finn. Hey Finn, guest star Finn. In terms of,
can you hold on while I sign the receipt for the pizza?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so in terms of grading and handling the amount of grading and pieces of paper that you're collecting every single day, or even on Google Drive, that is really important for you to get organized and have a facilitation or a system in place to figure that out. You might very well get overwhelmed with grading a lot of stuff. So if you do, you don't have to grade everything. Put a check mark on it and hand it back, and just read through them real quick. Don't give them a grade, and say that, and build in some peer feedback sessions. But the more that you can systematize the amount of feedback that you can give kids quickly, efficiently, and get it into their hands, it's out of your trays.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. You don't have to grade everything. You can look at it
and you go, ding, ding, ding.
Right, go through and go, yep. Nope, nope. And make 2 piles, go, great, I got it for tomorrow.
Yep.
I don't need to write a sentence there. I don't need to put an A on there. I don't need to put a 5 out of 5 on there. Yep. I got it. I know what you did. I saw what you did, and I'm going to use it in tomorrow's lesson.
Yeah.
I worked with this group of third grade teachers one time that they wore these, it's hard for me to describe. They basically wore these fanny packs while they taught.
Which are back, by the way.
They are.
Well, they were fanny packs, but they were almost like tool belts. And they had pockets in them. And so they had all of their key instructional aids that they were going to use as they walked around. Oh, it was incredible. Yeah, Tavina Goins, who's now a principal, she was the queen of it. And so everything was at her fingertips that she was going to use with kids.
That's awesome.
I
wonder if I was teaching 8th grade if they would make fun of me.
They would learn to love it.
They would.
And then the other thing that Jane taught me, this was an ingenious little system, which that the chalkboards back then were magnetic. Ooh. So she used magnets for everything. So when she was, for example, as simple as something in elementary school, I don't know if you have it as much in middle and high school, you're still rife with kids that don't put their names on papers.
Sure.
Right?
Yes, no-name bin.
So instead of wasting class time and figuring out, she would take the papers with no names and she would just put them under a magnet on the board. Mm-hmm. And so you'd go up and see your paper and you'd grab it.
Mine.
Yeah, there you go. So it was just a quick system that saved time.
And the other thing you told me at some point, probably years ago, we were talking about math instruction.
Yeah.
And it got back to the whole have to grade everything or giving kids feedback or knowing who got it. The use of whiteboards.
Oh, yeah, they're key.
You just stand there and they're doing it and they just hold up 2 steps that they've done, or they all have their own space on a chalkboard, a whiteboard, an area.
Yeah.
But it's big enough for you to go over, and you don't got to go over their shoulder.
Right.
You don't have to say, "Oh, I can't see that."
Oh my God! The walking up and down the rows to look at everybody's paper.
Standing in one place and scan, and yes, moving forward, crucial. Yeah. Getting feedback in an efficient way to inform whatever you're going to do next is huge.
I read somewhere one time that. And this is no knock on secondary education because I consider myself a secondary educator now, but somebody said that classrooms in middle schools and high schools are like gates at an airport.
Oh, jeez.
Well, you arrive for your flight, you sit and you wait, and then you get up and you go. right?
It's brutal.
No, but I'm saying, what's at a gate at an airport? It's seats, and you sit there, right?
True.
And you wait, and you spend 45 minutes, and then
True.
and
you
then
get on your
go.
phone and you sit in your phone
Correct.
the whole time.
The elementary the elementary classroom is like a house with different rooms, and that's, I mean, to an extent, that's really what a classroom should be like. It should be this kind of multifaceted place because kids learn in different ways.
They do.
And I guess the struggle there is to try to keep the clutter from building up. I know that
You got a lot of bodies.
you got a lot of bodies. You got a lot of bodies in
Sure.
there, and I was incredibly. If you talk to any of my students when I was an elementary school teacher, they would tell you that I was a little nutso about how they took care of the classroom.
Yeah.
Because to your point, it was key for them to have jobs and to help me with it, and I wanted it. They had to get it ready for the next day.
And it can spiral out of control very quickly, too.
Yes, it can.
You know?
What about so administrators in the room, teachers sharing classrooms? How do you manage the quote unquote decoration and the facilitation thereof of folks who share classrooms?
You'll run into that. I mean, you'll have teachers that want their classroom to be really collaborative,
Right.
and their classroom mate might be afraid that they need more control and they need kids in seated in a way where they can have control. I guess to thread the needle on that, I guess they just have to work together to figure that out.
Or you find teachers that could work collaboratively together. Or,
Right.
I think I've heard some principals survey teachers and kind of ask their preferences. Do you want to decorate your own room?
Yeah.
Or do you have no preference? Or some people would probably be fine with someone else decorating the room as long as it's organized. And
I think in secondary, and this is a very broad brush that I borrowed from Casey, but in secondary, I would venture to say that you run into less people that are particular about the setup and look / aesthetic of their room.
Oh, they totally do. I mean,
it diminishes.
when you're in a block schedule, or even you're even worse, a 7-period or 8-period schedule. Kids don't spend that much time in a classroom.
Yeah.
But I still think there's a great need to make the environment friendly and conducive to learning. And I think that clutter on work surfaces. One thing that always drove me crazy was stuff piled on heaters, or the ventilation system. You'd have stacks of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think teacher work surfaces tell you a lot about where the teacher is in their work. Mm-hmm. When they're organized, you tend to find somebody that's more systematic and on top of stuff.
Ginger Berry, to her
she's
credit,
the queen of organization.
Yeah. She helped me in so many ways. Yeah. One of the things that she did, and I have a final thought after this, but one of the things that she did is she told me to go to Home Depot and buy one of those drawer systems that you put like screws and like your tools in, and use that to organize your classroom materials, staples, rubber bands, stuff like that, rather than a teacher desk because we didn't have them. Genius. Label it, easy peasy.
Genius. And what's it say that, I don't know, it's kind of, what kind of commentary is it on it that women were the largest influence on us as teachers? Being organized.
Yeah.
Jane was the same way. Jane gave me this crate. It was a milk crate with files in it, and I would put file by day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all of the handouts that I was going to use.
Right.
I put them in there, so I wasn't grabbed them. I knew
awesome.
I knew what I had that day. Now that was, I would, these days with the de-emphasis on worksheets, because that was pretty worksheet based.
So that's transition is the hidden problem with organization, classroom organization, is how you organize your computer and your Google Drive. And it's hidden. Okay, most people don't want to talk about it because they're bad at it.
I'm going to sit back and be quiet on this one.
It's something that's super, super important, and it's something that you need to actually thoughtfully consider how you are organizing your files. And I know it sounds nerdy. It is nerdy. How you name your files. Mm-hmm. Super, super important.
So you can find them when you hit the search.
Or that. So you want to make it so that
give us a tip on that, because I'm clearly lame at that.
You don't. Well, first of all, you don't want to rely on your search, because search generally, even with Google, it's still not as effective because you're under so many different.
Google search is terrible.
Google search is actually very effective, but when you're in a big system, oftentimes it will give you everybody's shared files. Right. So in Google Drive, for example, you can narrow it down to only things. If you go to the advanced settings, you can narrow it down to only things owned by you. First thing.
I need to do that.
I need to do that
helpful.
too.
Yeah.
Very helpful. There are also little keys you can look up on. You can Google it and find out little search functions that can help you find things in Drive better. But you want to have a few top files, like maybe 5 folders that you're going to use on an everyday basis, and don't let your files just compile into that bigger file system. So the other piece is when you're, for example, for my observation reports, it has their initials, then underscore, it has the date of the observation. It says, formal 1, 2, 3, or 4. It says the class period, and it says the subject. All in that file in the same order.
Very long file name.
It's not as long as you might think, but it also since I have so many that I'm doing, it keeps it organized in a way that I can find it.
A format,
quickly. Whatever format you pick, it has to be very clear for yourself, and it has to be there in some capacity. Be able to organize alphabetically or by name or whatever.
I need to do better on that.
It's all about consistency, really.
So I see some teachers label lots of stuff as like day 1, day 2.
Not a fan of that.
Yeah.
Not a fan of that because days change, and if you're looking for a specific topic, if someone's asking you for some resource or something you did in a class, you're not going to be able to find it. Yeah. You can certainly put D1 in your file name somewhere, but one thing that we did in Project Success is we had it was organized by marking period, so it would be MP at somewhere in the file name it would be MP1, but towards the beginning it would say ancient Greece and whatever science topic we might be handling that day. So it had those 2 topics. Or a third topic, something that we knew was a big piece for that lesson, and had the date on it.
All right, we have geeked out.
So nerdy.
On
That's so important. People just let their files go out of control.
And so last thing I'll say, speaking of being digitally responsible and not having too much digital waste, one of the things that has always driven me crazy, a little bit as a principal, that is all the more reason to declutter, is the amount of trash that we throw out of classrooms at the end of the school year.
Ooh, yeah.
It's, if you've ever walked down a school hallway, I feel like if you declutter and you are organized during the school year, you reduce your footprint with garbage.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's always going to be stuff you have to throw out, but I do think it's an environmental concern as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks to Heather Walpert-Garan for getting this discussion going. Check out her piece, her blog, in Decluttering Your Classroom in Edutopia, which, by the way, as a Gen Xer, I have no idea how to say that word.
I love to hear you.
Edutopia. Edutopia.
Pete Buttigieg.
Even when you say it right, I could tell that you're like thinking to yourself.
Am I saying it right?
I'm saying it so weird.
It's a hard thing to say. How do you say it, Mr. Sids? Because you're like a charter member.
Edutopia.
No, it is not.
I say Edutopia.
Is it a Edutopia?
Edutopia.
Okay. All right.
There's like a J in there. It's like Pete Buttigieg.
All right. Who knew we were going to geek out so hard on decluttering your classroom?
I love talking about file naming conventions.
I know. All right. As always, Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Pulp Education, a full-service educational media company specializing in leadership, instruction, and 21st century school reform. If you want to weigh in on decluttering your classroom, on teacher tips, hit us up at Ed's Not Dead PC, or send us an email at edsnotdeadpc at gmail.com, right?
Yep.
All right, folks, thanks for tuning in to Teacher Tips. If you have suggestions for the show, hit us up. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.